Hello, and welcome to another episode of White Feather Counsel of Men.
Yes.
Sorry for a few moments and minutes of technical difficulties there, but we are glad to join you now.
That's right.
My name is Warren Hammonds. I'm one of the co-hosts, along with the co-host.
I'm Philip White. Nice to be with you.
And we are a part of this effort through the Trinity Episcopal Church located in Charlottesville, Virginia. A few reminders before we really launch into this session, just to remind you and let you know, if you are watching us by any chance live streaming and want to communicate with us, you can always use sort of the chat box, and we will either try to respond to any messages during the session. If you are watching an already loaded and taped session and want to communicate with us between sessions and maybe want us to respond to a question or a concern you may have, feel free to email us at wfcounselofmen@gmail.com. And the third thing, just to remind you that all of the sessions that we have done are loaded onto this YouTube channel, and you are welcome to view them at any point in your leisure.
Right.
If one of the titles is of interest to you, then tune in and try to get a little bit more background of what we are doing here with White Feather Counsel of Men, trying to work on some restoration and racial reconciliation, and also combined with some issues more relative to men and boys along the way as well. For the past couple of weeks, we've been dealing with a lot of the problems in America.
Yeah.
We've even, in fact, that's sort of been our focal point. We have been asking the question, is America really the land of the free? And does it provide justice for all, for everyone? And we've countered that with lots of ways that it does not feel like it's the land of the free and that there is justice for all. And those were good, informative sessions. More on the negative side of things to remind us how far we still need to go, and all the work that we need to do. Tonight, we thought we'd step aside from sort of that approach and maybe deal with a little bit more of a constructive way, or at least some constructive steps that some are taking or that are being done in our society that try to promote some reconciliation, that try to promote a little bit more healing. And it's not all the answers, but it's a little it's steps in the right direction, we think. But it might be worth our time to explore, and it's certainly not without controversy. So what we're going to sort of launch into tonight are the removal of statues, the renaming of buildings, roadways, places that have Confederate marks on them, that are honoring the Confederacy, that are honoring persons who had slaves or were slave owners, and that promoted that kind of culture, and that promoted that kind of hatred and hurt. And so it's, again, not without controversy, but it is a step that a lot of cities, towns, jurisdictions are taking to at least try to make right some about the historical context. And when we remove a statue, when we rename a building, we're not erasing the history.
Right.
We can't erase the pain. We can't erase the trauma that is caused by the injustice and the oppression that has built up to that time. But maybe we are moving forward a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hand it over to you in just a minute. But a report from the Southern Poverty Law Center right after 2021, actually, and it was sort of prompted by the murder of George Floyd. In fact, his murder sparked the removal and the relocation or the renaming of about 200 memorials right after that incident. I mean, it pertinent to that. But as far as statues are concerned, the bad news when this report was given is that out of the right over 800 statues that were around and planted in the United States, about 720 of them were still standing, were still remaining.
Yeah.
And therefore, only about 73, 75 or so had been removed at that point. Certainly more have been removed now, but that's what we're dealing with. So there is that step seemingly in the right direction to make some amends,
Right.
to state history in a better way, or at least not honor the negative history or the oppressive history that these statues, buildings, roadways
Sure.
stand for until they're renamed or taken down.
Right.
I'll give it to you. That's how we're going to start.
Yeah. Thank you, Warren. That's it speaks to while you was talking, I was thinking about we're going to introduce these lyrics to this song that I've known for a long time. It was a song that came out in 1975. And the title of the song was called "Wake Up, Everybody." Wake Up, Everybody, by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Now, this song was produced by Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, which is out of the Philadelphia area. And the song went number one for a period of time, again, back in 1975. And the lead vocal on the song was this gentleman by the name of Teddy Pendergrass. Wake up, everybody, wake up. And the lyrics of this song, if you want to take the time to look at the lyrics, there's certain songs that came along during the late 60s and the 70s that was almost like a prophecy. And this song, the lyrics, really is appropriate today in regard to the lyrics that speaks about we got to get away from backwards thinking, kind of go back. And the question is, where are we going back to? When you heard terms like make America great again, when were we great? I mean, that's the question. When were we great?
And whose definition of great?
Yes. What has to happen in America to make us great again, other than us saying our greatness is in our future? You see, that's why personally I believe. And when the lyrics in this song speaks about backwards thinking, and you heard people in their defense about Southern traditions and we need to honor our heroes and things like that, and eradicate all the history of the country out of textbooks and things like that. Why would we do such a foolish thing? In my opinion, history is history, regardless if it's not pretty. It's still history, and it stands on its own. And we could always learn from history. We can learn things we should do or do better or don't do at all. And that's just history. And there's nothing to be afraid about. History is history. All of the people who were around during the 16, 17, 1800s, they lived in their culture. And if their cultures consisted of, quote unquote, people having human beings as property, so to speak, if that was a quote unquote a social status thing to do, that's what they did. Now, it was Thomas Jefferson that said many years ago, that America at some point would have to pay for its original sin. And that original sin, as we all know, is slavery. And the question has always been like a yoke around America's neck. What do we do to correct that? What can we do to make things better? And I think this whole efforts of removing statues and renaming streets and things like that, that's a step. That's a small step in the right direction. And until reparation that takes place, we did it for the Japanese. We probably did it for other peoples that came to America. So why hasn't it happened for African American families? And that until that is really, really addressed, and find the fortitude to do it, I think we will always have that separation. And it's just something that we have to be conscious of. And this song, there've been others. Marvin Gaye. What's the title of this song? Marvin Gaye's song was, it won't come to me at this point. But Marvin Gaye had a song too, in reference to What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. And that song was big out in the 70s as well. And both of these songs kind of, they could have wrote these songs yesterday, because they kind of speak to where we are now. And I was very saddened this morning My wife and I was watching the news, and they made a report on a child, 13-year-old boy in Washington D.C. Him and a buddy who was probably age 12, and they showed a picture of him. He looked like a little boy. They was trying to carjack this person's car, and the person that they were trying to carjack was a federal security officer, not necessarily a police, but he was a security officer. So he had, I guess, authorities similar to police officers. And this driver of this vehicle, the little boy, had his hand in his pocket like he was holding something, I guess. This is according to the officer. And he pulled out his weapon and shot him in the chest. And the little fellow died. The other little guy ran off. 13 years old. And my first thought was, you always think about, well, was the guy white? Was he black? Well, you always have that in your mind. And my public service work in reference to how you try to de-escalate situations and try to prevent things from escalating. And I'm just speaking from the sideline because I don't know what amount of fear had entered that officer's mind for that short period of time between him recognizing these two boys, and they were young boys, fragile-looking boys, to the point where he decided to pull his weapon and shoot the boy, shot him in the chest and killed him. Because he had just said to these two boys, I'm a police officer. You done stepped to the wrong person. What are you boys doing? I am armed. And probably, this is just my guess, if he would have said something like that to these boys, they probably took off running. Because when he did pull his weapon out and shot, the other little guy took off running. But this little boy is dead. He's gone. His family has got to grieve that loss of this very, very, very young child, just a child. And we have to think, how could a boy this young get to have that type of courage to want to do something like that? Where does that come from? Is that culture? Where did he get that type of courage from? Which has cost him his life. 13 years old. So Warren and I spent a lot of time trying to dissect and take a deep dive into the culture as with the one that we're living in now, and just the amount of separations that we have. And the question is, will we ever be able to come together as a collective people and just make this country, to really be a place that's justice for all? And I finish with this. In Virginia, that's where we are. We're here in the central Virginia, in the Richmond area. And there was a report today about estimation, maybe about 3,500 ex-felons were trying to vote here in Virginia. Early voting, we're allowed to do early voting in Virginia. And they were denied because many of them are still on probation, so to speak. So the people who decided not to allow these individuals to vote because they saw them as being on probation and thought that was a reason for them not to vote. So, but what they did, which was good, they complained about it and complained loud enough that was reversed, that was corrected. But the question has been asked, why were they denied to vote in the first place? When they have been given that status. And for me personally, being a history buff, I just kind of had flashbacks to thinking when you talk about felons and how that whole criminal justice system is the flip side of a continuation of slavery. You heard the terms from the schoolyard to the prison yard and those kind of things. And that most of the people you're going to find in our institutions of incarcerations, unfortunate or unfortunate, are people that look like me. And we know once slavery ended, there was all kinds of creative things done. The laws passed, Jim Crow laws and all kinds of stuff passed. And if I'm standing on a corner talking to a guy that looked like me, we could be arrested for loitering just by standing on the corner having a conversation, and be converted back to that 13th Amendment that if you are incarcerated in America, you can be subject to quote unquote slave-like conditions. So there's and if I was keen for a day, I always think about that. That would be one thing that I would remove from this sacred document we call the Constitution, slave-like conditions. And as we go, the correlation between those that are incarcerated at massive numbers in America, if there's one thing we do good is incarcerate people, most of them look like me. Is that by coincidence, or is that a continuation?
Yeah.
The systemic biases and racism that we deal with every day.
If you are out there listening, we have a session that deals with some statistics on those. I forgot what that session was entitled, but it dealt with a lot of the inequities that we still now see, and one of those were in that system, in the criminal justice system, and the racial diversity there, and the racial disparity there. Yeah, you had mentioned that quote by the president at one time that said that we were going to pay for our original sin. It brings me back to, so how do we pay for it? How do we pay for such deep hurt, deep anguish, deep pain, deep oppression that we caused, that my people caused? So the step of removal of statues, bring that back into conversation, is one step that is sort of being done. The renaming of places, the renaming of buildings, but that's just a small step. This report, where I got some of these stats from, sort of warned us. Says that this Southern Poverty Law Center says the legacy of the Confederacy is far more enduring than any memorial ever could be. So removing it doesn't remove that stain of guilt. It might put it more into context, put it back. It doesn't honor it. It doesn't glorify it. So at least we're taking it off of that kind of prominence. But, any of the Confederate-related buildings, statues, they misrepresent history. They glorify people who perpetuated slavery and who attempted secession from the United States, and who eventually lost the Civil War anyway. So it honors in some sort of some very negative historical ways, and the statues and these, I think, buildings, even the roadways, they sort of stay. They sort of stay as painful reminders. I think, to those who have been oppressed and in the past, and continue to be oppressed by institutional racism. So that's why I'm for the removal. I'm not for the removal without the discussion, because what I don't want people to think is, I hope that there aren't small towns and cities and jurisdictions and places out there that think, oh, if we take that statue down, we've done our good work for the day. Let's wash our hands clean. And now we don't have to worry about what the present dangers, what the present pains and hurts are. So I don't want that to become sort of I don't want that to desensitize us from what is really happening. And we need to ask ourselves, is that enough? And it's not enough. It might be a step. And, I also want to know, is this what people who were wronged want? I haven't asked a whole lot of my African-American friends if they want all the statues, if they think it's, we've talked some about it. But I haven't talked a lot in my circles about the evaluation of, does it make you feel better that those statues are down, and what more can we do? So that's just a discussion out there. And then you also mentioned the word reparations, because I think that's another step, a deeper step in the right direction. But that's a whole nother conversation about how to do that in our society. How do we do that with tax laws that are built in now that maybe need to change in order for reparations to be made? They can be done, but it may not be a simple approach. So I'll leave it at that for now, but I want to come back to a few things, but turn it over.
It's we America is a very fortunate and a very rich country, and as we see how we can support, we think about international conflicts that we're having around the world, and America comes to the aid of other countries with billions of dollars, in military equipment and all kinds of logistic and things like that. And I don't think it's an issue of and just giving, I guess, respiration to descendants of slavery is it's not going to eradicate, the in-depth amount of suffering and pain and trauma that has been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's like this morning when my wife and I heard the report about the 13-year-old that was shot, we immediately, the next question was the officer black or white? Like that has to be some qualification put to that, Mm-hmm. And then for us, it's like if the officer is never identified, we automatically assume, well, he must have been white. That if he was black, they would have said his name. They would have showed his picture. Mm-hmm. So, but when they don't show, and that's just conditional thinking that we've had over the years, that he must be a white guy. You see, and that officer could be feeling pretty bad about what happened. But does he have the opportunity to feel bad? He's probably not ever going to be. He's not going to. I would tend to say that he probably won't be identified. Mm-hmm. That would be my guess. He won't be. He won't be charged with anything because he felt this person had a weapon. Yeah. There was no weapon found to date. Yeah. For the young man, he died. But the reaction of the officer and how that could, it's no easy answer to that situation. As you and I was talking, come over, how would I have acted if that same young man would have walked up to my vehicle saying the same things he said to the officer? See what I'm saying? So we can do sideline commentation, but it doesn't put us in that spot as far as what that thinking that officer had to go through at that moment. I wish he could have used some of his de-escalation skills, you see, to kind of talk this little boy down. Yeah. But, it is what it is. But there we go again, another young black male gone. But that young man, that kind of behavior had been cultivated in him. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. For him to be able to do something.
Well, nothing's going to take his life back.
Right.
Nothing's going to bring back the hurt from slavery days, from leftover slavery days, from institutional racism that we now have. But we can move along, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with this work that we've been at for several months, but also this idea of what's going on in the United States now in particular with the removal of some statues. There are a couple of other things going on. There are a lot of religious groups that are now publishing or coming up with resolutions of something, resolutions of apology, resolutions of confession, resolutions of sorrow. They call them different things. But they sort of own up to their role in racism and in slavery, especially a lot of the white religious denominational bodies that I've read of that have done sort of racial reconciliation resolutions have started those with pretty much saying, we know that we were part of the problem. Our race was the problem. We are the oppressors, and we are still involved in it because of who we are. But we want to make things right. Again, I hope those bodies of people don't write these beautifully written resolutions to then say, wow, look what we wrote. This is beautiful, and we've done our job to say we're sorry and let's move on. But I think they want to create the dialogue. They want to create healing. That's the intent. And I do think when we remove statues, rename buildings, that's a step. But I wish it could be done in a way that is contextual, that maybe creates a better understanding, even from my white person's viewpoint, about the depth of pain and the depth of trauma that racism over the years has caused and is now embedded into our world. And that's why maybe reparations is another. It sounds almost like a token. I think I was reading somewhere that one of the reparations that we have made in the United States, I think it was actually Reagan that confirmed the reparations to Japanese families from the war. And I think at that point it was $20,000 per family. Well, you know, that $20,000 today is I would like that, but it sounds like a token amount. And there's no way you can put a price tag on the death or on the pain of slavery.
Right.
But is there a way that we can help the cause that we have so much hurt? And is this where is that line, and how do we do it? We don't have the answer. We're sort of here to just explore the conversation and to say, here's some things that are being done.
Right.
And can we get involved in them? Can we participate in the conversation about how to make a very wrong in the past more right now, even though we know it's not erasing it or it's not burying it, but it's dealing with it maybe in a more responsible and now reflective and appropriate way.
Well, you know, one step that I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a flashback to the Georgetown University in the D.C. area. That Georgetown University history is knee deep in oppression and slavery back in its early days. And once the current leadership at Georgetown recognized how deep that institution had been from its creation with slavery, they have made policies now by finding descendants of people who worked at the place, who they know has connection with relatives now, that their relatives now can attend Georgetown. I want to say, and I want to say they can attend there tuition free. That's a step.
Yeah.
You see, if
that's
they
a good
can,
example.
that's a very good example.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that are in a position, because, you know, as Americans, we value education. So this great university is now saying we're going to take steps if we can locate descendants of folks we know that were in the grips of slavery at this, on the grounds of this university. We're going to offer that person's descendants to get an education here, tuition free.
Yeah, and you know, there are probably a lot of creative things. I mean, we could look back. I mean, there's so many urban cultures that have disenfranchised African American communities completely, just wiped them off. You move away from this neighborhood, you know, we're taking your neighborhood away. So is reparation there giving them land somewhere back to build upon, or to raise a family, or to have a farm, you know, depending on what they do with it. But, you know, give back to something that was taken away. You can't give back the life, but what can you give back? Is there some sort of, not just trivial payback that just helps us feel less guilty, but what are appropriate ways that we can really dialogue? And what are some other examples? And maybe our viewers might have some of those from their from their own cities or from their own towns where they come from, and what's doing that. So we basically just wanted to open that up tonight. I think you can tune us out as you want to, but we just wanted some dialogue on some of the steps that are being taken, knowing that more has to be done to repair the deep hurt and the deep anguish and the deep trauma that oppression and racism has caused.
Yeah, yeah, and I would I want to say this very directly to white America and Black America. Let me start first with white America. It's highly improbable that any white person in America is not aware of the privilege that you have by being white in America. There is certain privilege that just comes along with the birth, and we all know that. And it's also true for Black folks when you're born African American in America, that you may have to deal with some challenges. It's just historically a fact. But in reference to how we take those two realities and bring them together and be able to come up with a new form of existence would be a wonderful place to start. See, last week we unpacked Melanie Angel's song "In This America," and part of her lyrics in that song talked about after all these years, we still dealing with this sense of, can my baby boy be safe? How do I protect him from your fears? And that fear, that systemic complicit fear that seems to be rooted in us as a people, that we can know something is wrong, but we just have fear that if you speak up, if you act on it, you may fear, and which is a reality, possible reality, that you could become a victim of some type of hatred. And it goes on all the time, and you can see a lot of the politicians are afraid to speak from their soul about various topics in Congress because they're fearful. They're fearful that they will get death threats, and it's just a sad time that we are living in. That's the norm that we have. You see, and I just have a flashback to the reason one of the main reasons that Warren and I are doing this as a white male and a Black male, the twin reality that we have is that we both are males. And when you think about the amount of harm, the amount of danger, the amount of trauma that is perpetrated on people in America is done by folks that look like us, males. Okay, that's where we got to begin as a country to address what are we doing wrong in raising boys and supporting men. Because all of these, the amount of violence that we do is mostly in the camp of boys and men, not women, not girls and women. It's in our camp. And until we as a country can come together and form some type of united commission to address how we are developing boys and men to be emotionally safe, that they don't have to feel when something goes wrong in their lives, they have to feel like they got to turn to violence to justify their particular feelings. And it's something that we really, really, really have to address, because I tell you this is my position from my own research, that boys and men in America, without some sense of stability, without some sense of spirituality, without some sense of having a healthy outlook on life, can be some pretty dangerous people. And almost every day somewhere in America, a boy or a man is doing something to harm somebody. And until we address that, just lay it out there and address that, and what are we doing that can make that better for boys and men? And the beat goes on. The beat goes on. I don't see anything changing to that significant degree that we can look back on this and say we really have crossed that bridge to be a safer, more united place. Yeah, I don't think it can happen. And I leave you with this. There's this quote by James Keller, Keller. It's a pretty cool quote. And it says, "A candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. A candle loses nothing by lighting another candle." And if each of us symbolically can look at our lives as a candle, and everyone that we come in contact with, we want to do something to light their light so that they can shine, so that they can be the best person they can. We treat people with a sense of humility. We treat people with a sense of respect. We always be in a position to try to help. That, I think, is a perfect model that we can use. Now, this model has been around for a long time. If you're a spiritual person, you can just look at Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ was all about being someone of service. You know, that's a perfect model. You may have other models. You can look at many people who were what's considered better angels among us. They are out there. So if we're not doing things that make our community and our culture better, then what's your purpose? You know, what are you doing? If you're just living in your little cocoon and trying to, you know, make sense of the world with not being part of it, then what kind of life is that? What kind of life is that? So we hope that this has stimulated some thoughts for you. And if you want to share your thoughts with us, one gave you the email address that you can send us to, wfcounselman@gmail.com, and we would love to hear from you. And we appreciate that. As Warren stated, we have many sessions we've done that are on the YouTube channel, White Feather Counsel Men. Check it out. Hopefully there'll be something on there that you'll like to see, and we would appreciate you, communicating with us, and we would appreciate that. This is our only session we're going to do for the month of November. We'll do another session in December, and then we'll look forward to 2024. So we thank you for joining us this evening, and we do hope we heard from you. Good night. Thank you.